set? Let's get started. What we've stuck to as the affirmative team throughout this round is the fundamental premise that federal courts are objectively better than military commissions. Just as my partner said in her last speech, the negative team has failed to provide a compelling reason to keep military commissions as an option. Because even if they're proven to be able to work in some situations just as well as federal courts, they have not been proven to ever be preferable over federal courts. And because federal courts have a precedent of success, they ought to be used exclusively. I'd like to start by responding to the negative speaker's last speech. The first response was that security is protected under military commissions. And my response is no threat. No threat. As my partner established in her last speech, the negative team has failed to provide anything more than speculation about an actual national security threat at stake. We even read the piece of evidence talking about how there has never been any attacks, either in court or in federal prisons, when terrorists are brought onto U.S. soil. That concern has never been clarified and does not hold true for this debate round, meaning that the security concern is not warranted. The second point they brought up was no response to national security not being harmed. They said we didn't prove that national security won't be harmed. My response is we can't prove the negative. Now this is the thing about debate theory here. We as the affirmative team cannot prove that something will not happen. That's the job of the negative team to show whether something will happen. It's impossible for us to prove in any situation that something will not happen. That's a burden that is impossible to fulfill and not one that should be placed upon us. It's the job of the negative team to show a concrete reason that there's a national security threat, and once again, they have not provided that. The third point they brought up was that we cannot fulfill the burden for Section 1033. Why Section 1033 was put in place? My response is no impact. When we have in our mandate to repeal Section 1033, it was talking about the prohibition for transferring terrorists to from Guantanamo Bay to the U.S. They said we need to provide reasons why that was put in place. However, that does not affect the fact that we're repealing it and then allowing Guantanamo terrorists to be moved into the United States. It doesn't change the details of our plan, and it doesn't impact what we're trying to accomplish. The fourth point was that we pick and choose cases in federal courts. And my response is not what the evidence says. Not what the evidence says. Now, when they talked about how there are different cases in the when we said there was a 90% convictions rate, that 90% convictions rate referred to a myriad of different cases, all of which were addressed under federal court jurisdiction. Once again, we established how the jurisdiction of federal courts are not different than military commissions. It's what military commissions can do and better. Federal courts have access to over 4,000 charges, military law and criminal law, while military commissions have access to only military law. Federal courts don't address different cases. They address all the cases military commissions can and more. The next point was that our plans did not advocated by the advocates, and this has been going around this entire debate. My response is reform is necessary. Once again, they advocate reform, and this is incredibly clear. My other response is precedent. Precedent both of failure of the commissions and of success of federal courts. Because once again, those reforms we outlined in the 1AC, trying to make military commissions work, have consistently failed. That's why we as the affirmative team are proposing to no longer use military commissions, because we have tried to reform them in the past, but we believe that they should no longer be used. That's something that we have the ability to do as the affirmative team. So with all of those responses made, I'd like to bring up one basic voting issue for the affirmative team, that of the precedent of success. And I have three little points under this. First is federal courts have broad authority. We discussed how federal courts are well equipped to dealing with terrorism cases well back in our 1AC, something that wasn't fundamentally responded to by the negative team. How they have access to a myriad of different charges and a broad jurisdiction. The second sub-point is due punishment in due time. The negative team has never attempted to respond to the fact that federal courts have advantages both in efficiency and also in effectiveness. And all of the examples we brought up in our 1AC to prove this have not been addressed. That shows how our original justification stands. And the third point on the precedent of success is international cooperation. Now this was also completely dropped by the negative team. The fact that when we use federal courts, our counterterrorism partners in other countries will cooperate with extradition requests, which is able to facilitate counterterrorism and justice for terrorists who have committed savage acts. So once again, if we go back to what we're accomplishing through our plan, we're trying to prevent how the status quo causes terrorists to be legally innocent. Those 5 9/11 terrorists who have been sitting in the Guantanamo Bay for nearly 18 years have not been convicted. And even though the commissions are supposed to convict them, they have completely failed to do so. Again, the entire premise of our plan is that military commissions are supposed to do a good job, but they have failed to do a good job. The intent of what they are is completely different from the reality. And because of what we can see in the reality is a precedent of success through federal courts and a precedent of failure with military commissions. The only reasonable option is to choose federal courts. Thank you very much.